Today's session, transforming access security in identity lifecycle management, a great topic for today's session. So I'm Emma, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm joined by SafePass CEO Adil Khan and Director of Client Services Verinda Brandauer. So before we jump in to this valuable topic today, just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So the session is being recorded for on-demand use after today's session. And if you do have any questions, which we hope you do, please pop those in the control panel and we'll hopefully get to those at the end of the session. So Adil, Verinda, do you want to briefly introduce yourselves before we get started, and then we'll dive into the session?
Yeah, sounds good. I'll go first. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Adil Khan. I'm the CEO and founder, and excited to have one of the key thought leaders in our space that joined our team recently. Verinda has been instrumental in helping customers over the decades with their challenges. So I'll let you talk. I won't straight to steal a thunder, let you give your own update, Verinda.
Thanks a lot, Adil. Hello, everybody. Verinda Brandauer. Yep, I've been helping clients and customers in this space for over 2 decades now, since the start of the digital revolution of identity and controls. I'm looking forward to some of the content that we're going to present here for you today. I hope it will be naturally educational, but also promote thinking and some interesting thoughts about how you might apply this to your perimeters and identities today.
Great. Okay, let's dive in.
Do you want me to pick up here first? Yeah. Here's what we see across ERP, SaaS, and cloud environments, right? The real issue isn't that access exists across the identities that are multiplying and NHIs and constantly changing business environments. It's that governance can't keep up with that change. And what we see environments, in environments with multiple ERPs and hybrid IAM stacks, shadow SaaS and contractors with access growth, right, in and out, doing things they need to do at speed, that access complexity has doubled in the last 3 years. And that's not me saying that. All the thought leaders, whether you go to ISACA, whether you go to the Arbinger Institute, whether you look at Gartner, all say that, and they dovetail that with controls haven't, right? And so that's what you really have to look at, okay, that this problem exists and how it actually forms. Adil?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're spending time with our clients on, what are the challenges that are current, right, in the current environment. As you said, the environment is evolving, and therefore that old perimeter of everything tucked behind a VPN has been removed essentially as a comfort layer. And now we have to deal with the attack surface that's much broader, and attacks are coming at a much more higher velocity than ever before. So that's where there's a new need to redefine what does it mean to govern access in the enterprise in this highly dynamic, fragmented environment. So today we'll dig into that a little bit, you and me, Verinda.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you think about the access risk, life science, if you will, what you'll see is that the basic process on the surface looks, pretty standard. As you can see on the graphic there, you have tools in place that are used to, onboard your resources when they join. Sometimes that's done through HR, other times it's through your IDM. And it seems like it's working on the surface. And then you move on to managing and operating, doing the activities that you are required to do as part of your role and responsibility in the organization. And that's where challenges start to arise, right? That, you know, we're all multitasking these days. We're being asked to do more and more, wear multiple hats. And that's where challenges come up. And you'll see that change management starts to fall apart. Again, you know, you have change management tools. You may be using ServiceNow or some other ticketing tool that's supposed to quote unquote track those changes, but the wheels come off basically, right? Because the privileges are very complex. As I mentioned before, there's a sprawl of software, SaaS, cloud, all of the above, right? So it's difficult for humans, and now with AI, non-human identities to stay current with the intended privileges. And then there's the question of temporary access becoming permanent. I think, Vrinder, you said that in our getting ready for this, preparing for this session, and I really want you to expand on that. But yeah, I've seen the same thing from, you know, we all have some sort of a firefighter policy written up somewhere, and our clients do their best they can, but it's just a policy and it's not enforced. And help desk doesn't know what's permanent and what's temporary. And so you have this scope creep on privileges that creates, you know, reputational risk we materialize as headline news in Wall Street Journal. So that's a big one, and I'll let Vrinder talk more about it. And finally, you know, the dormant accounts that end up becoming forever accounts, right? Instead of timely termination, even with the tools, because as you said previously, Vrinder, there's multiple, you know, sources. So in one word, I mean, it's not the intent of our clients and organizations to have these risks, obviously, but it's what we call the drift. You know, people have accumulated access as the organization has, you know, proceeded with its mission year after year. And you know, I want to pick on joiner, mover, lever as an example of a process that we help manage where we find gaps in our clients' organization. So they would have an IDM system, like I mentioned. They may have a system for provisioning through an IGA, even, you know, maybe they have a sale point or something like that. But often these systems, and I'll throw in ITSMs like ServiceNow in that group as well, because we see a lot of provisioning still happening through service tickets. What we're finding is that the customers are unable to rely on these controls in an effective manner because they don't go down to the fine-grained privileges that matter. So what do I mean by that? So you may have a catalog of roles that have done a great job of taking your job roles from your business. So I'm the finance manager. When I join, I get assigned certain privileges to transact in the general ledger system, to enter journals, post journals, whatever the case may be, do some reconciliation work. Maybe I need to look at ledgers and subledgers to make sure my close process works. So I've got, you know, inquiry into my payables ledgers, my receivable ledgers. Fixed assets is another category where I may have to do some adjusting entries from time to time. So all of that access that's been granted to me when I joined, let's say now I move into procurement because the organization is growing quickly and they need cost accountants in procurement to improve the supply chain that is rapidly changing because of trade dynamics in the globe right now. And so now I will keep those old privileges, and your catalog, when you go in the catalog and request access from these high-level systems, it'll grant me the catalog, but that catalog is somebody just typed up that role name. It's not exactly the privileges in my ERP system or my Coupa procurement system or whatever I'm using, Ariba, that I need access to. So now I have mishmash of access. That's a very real problem that a customer recently reported to me. And the way we are helping solve that problem, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but the way we're helping solve that problem is that being able for the approvers and reviewers of access, the owners of access, if you will, to see that level of fine-grained detail and summarize it for them in a user-friendly, human-readable format so they can make that decision. Now, that's today's problem, but we're also thinking about next year and the next 5 years. And this problem is going to grow 10x, or some cases, talking to Gartner, 100x, where now you're going to have a large number of non-human entities that will be delegated some of this grunt work, right? And so now you have a much bigger problem. So our suggestion is to look at this problem today, baseline it, and then size it up for the solution that not only overcomes your hurdles today, but also can scale onto your roadmap as you adopt new technologies and tools coming to the market. Go ahead, Brinder, if you want to add some more to that.
Yeah, the great overview, Adil. That's right. And the average enterprise does not have a single unified lifecycle enforcement layer, right? And as you've highlighted quite rightly, risk doesn't just begin at onboarding, it accumulates at each of the layers that you've diligently taken us through there, right? And it is created quietly over time. And in most breaches that you see, the access was technically approved, but as you said, that drift, that governance drift occurred. And that's what you need to be ready for, right? And that's what effectively we build our solution around.
Good.
Do you want me to pick up on this one?
Yep, go for it.
I think certainly what I've seen is that many organizations discover access issues only during audits, so they're very reactive, right? And that then means that the risk has existed way and long before it was ever detected, right? Because the reason for that is that the comfort trap and that warmth that we get is that we get snapshot certifications, manual reviews, reactive controls, right?
Yep.
But that doesn't meet the governance requirements today, right? Danger in the comfort zone is what they teach you, right? When they say, oh, if you're comfortable in your career, then you're not in the growth zone, right? These kinds of things. And look, that's not a bad thing, right? Annual certifications get completed, IGAs deployed, PAM implemented. Hey, why shouldn't we be okay? But actually, what that in reality means is there's an illusion of control, right? Yes, certifications validate these snapshots, but as I mentioned a moment ago, and certainly as the thread through the last couple of slides has been, its risk accumulates between these static snapshots, right? And then that contrasts with what is needed today, which is a continuous, context-aware, cross-application process and system, something that's a life cycle embedded process of governance. And I think that's the major takeaway that I see in terms of that comfort zone and the need to move away from it.
Yeah, and I think in a nutshell, legacy IAM gives you that false sense of control and perhaps even compliance, but it also is a window into, or a breach into, where cyber attacks occur because of the batch nature of the solutions that are deployed today. Risk is happening every nanosecond through more modernized ways of attack, especially with AI. there's many, it's expanded surface. And this approach that you just highlighted around, annual reviews and periodic check-ins is just literally, like you said, it's a false sense of control.
Agreed, 100%.
We have touched on this, but what is the reality of managing access every day in these very large, complex organizations that we're talking about here, or in any organization?
Yeah, I was talking a little bit about an example. I always like to think in terms of our customer experiences. And I think this slide really reflects many of the pain points that our customers have reported to us in the last few months and weeks. So yes. I'll just maybe take a stab at it, Vrinder, and then you can please add your insight into it. So this is what it looks like, essentially. It's a day in the life of a customer, day-to-day kind of an approach, right? I'll start with the first one. Constant access requests and exceptions overwhelm. So you have a process. Let's say you've put in a tool or multiple tools that are providing you ways to get access, but there are so many exceptions to the workflow that it's really, the real work is happening offline through emails and phone calls. And if you're lucky, walking up to people's desks if you're in the same office. But it's not really effective because the data is too high level. It's, it's sort of jargon, technical jargon in there that is not quite meeting the needs. So that creates a challenge. The other point talks about the manual cleanup. So let's say you've had a lot of exceptions and you end up with overprivileged access, like the example I mentioned, where your roles are today built at the roles catalog level, and they're not actual true roles that are granted at the IT level or the application layer level, and in the future AI level. So now you got to go clean it up because either you have introduced lots of new privileges that don't comply with your own policies, or what I'm seeing more recently is as companies have moved towards a digital platform, that many of these privileges are just being granted to the roles by the supplier of the application. So what we call third-party risk. So because you have third-party suppliers, you're relying on their application, their cloud, and they're constantly innovating to keep up with their competitors. They're introducing new functionality, let's say into an ERP system to make your life easier, or they're offering some new feature or capability to add AI, for example. But now you've got, these roles with privileges that you didn't expect to have. In fact, I had a client recently that said, suddenly my number of risks, went 10x because the vendor introduced a new feature to make it easy for us to create suppliers through spreadsheets, but that risk was tenfold because now all the roles that had to do with procurement got that feature by default. Now the smart companies are building preventive controls into their change management process and not just relying on the IT service requests to manage that. And they're also running tie-out analytics against policies against their baseline roles versus new. But I would say it's a very small sliver of the pie, right? Most companies aren't doing that. So that's the reality. Offboarding is notoriously slow because of operational reasons. You may not have processed the final payroll because you have a 60-day offboarding process because you have to make sure the benefits and the compensation all gets processed, so your HR holds it. But your IT is triggering that because IT is maintaining those roles while the employee has been offboarded from the business. They may not have access to, let's say, the primary IDM system, but those old on-premise applications that are still using the ADFS, let's say, or some other way of provisioning or local logins, they have not happened because you're living in this transition phase where some of your business is running on-prem, other is on the cloud. So now you have a problem where the risk is getting mitigated in some areas, but not across the enterprise. And bottlenecks like the offboarding from HR is holding up the entire life cycle, along with having that multiple sources of truth around identity. Another item on the bottom left, number 4, is that why users have access. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about earlier, that unless you provide details to the reviewers and approvers of access, they actually will simply grant access. So one of the things we've seen is, and this is an experiment you can do in your own shop, is let's say you have a organization structure like most organizations that you have departments. So what we have seen, people in finance will grant access to people on their team, their own subordinates, much more frequently and easily. But if somebody from a different department like procurement asks for access, that's when it gets scrutinized. But the way the cycles are set up in most of the workflows is that you get to approve your own people. So people are very lenient about giving access because you don't want to have one of your direct reports constantly complaining about their access. So it's just a human nature thing, right? That you grant them more access. You don't want them off your back and productive and producing all those great reports that the board needs. And so this whole concept of people roles, where it's a traditional HR hierarchy, doesn't work for identity as well as you would think because of this mismatch. So what we recommend, and what we have seen customers that are leading this area more successfully, is that they have concept of role owners versus people owners, right? And role owners are people that are independent from their own subordinates. So you control risk in finance. Anybody that needs access to finance, you get to approve that, whether they're in your team or not. And then and those finance role owners are held accountable for overprivileged access. And that works a lot better. Simple change in process. So if you go back to your shops and ask people how they do today, your role provisioning, I guarantee you that majority of the people don't use this concept. And that's the reality as we're talking about where the problems exist. Audit requests arrive with little preparation time. And that's the truth, right? I mean, we're continuously being asked to provide evidence of control effectiveness. And yet we never quite know, and it's by design because audit is independent. They're the third line of defense, right? So if you're the first line of defense, you're part of management team, or even if you're second line of defense, let's say the compliance team, you're not supposed to get your audit test plan ahead of schedule. So by design, to remain independent, your external, and in many cases even internal auditors, will not share exactly what they're going to request until they're ready to audit, because they want to have that benefit of being able to randomly pick samples and test. And sometimes what we're seeing from our audit partners is they're also requesting 100% sample with tools like SafePass offers. So it's not just the old sampling, it's a complete population test. And again, what we're seeing in reality is 9 out of 10 times our clients don't have the data ready because not in one place. And there are many reasons for that. None of them have to do with people not wanting to do a good job. Everybody that we work with is intending to do their best to make their company and their roles successful. But what happens is, because of these previous points that I've made, that by the time it gets to the final line of defense, which is your audit, that there's just too much undocumented outside the system activity that has occurred. And so the system itself becomes unreliable because you're doing things still through emails and exceptions, and your roles are getting updated, your privileges are coming in that you weren't aware of even day before the audit, right? So that creates a significant stress for the organization, and now your auditors have a limited bandwidth to write down the findings and present that to the board. So you're burning the midnight oil, right? I've had clients call us on the weekends and long weekends, that, hey, we have to get this done before the audit is closed. Can you guys help us? And we're always there to step up and work 24/7 for the clients, but we feel terrible for them too, that they just don't have this visibility, and they have to react at the last moment. But if you were to put in if I did a silver lining, if you were able to put in preventive controls and monitoring controls, that does solve the problem. So many of the clients that are moving to that, and many of them have learned the heavy lessons, right, by doing the reactive work and having the findings show up in the board meetings, and they're moving to this approach or have moved to this approach, are reporting significantly better results, but also peace of mind. That's more important. The last point is just basically around the sprawl that we've been talking through it. So there is no monolithic mainframe. That's no news to anyone on this call. But because of this sprawl, there is just a phenomenal number of privileges that are floating around, identities, as we have transformed the organization onto a digital platform. So every activity that you can think of is happening on some sort of a system, and these systems are not always integrated together. So sources of truth are not always clear, and that creates its own problem of having multiple applications that have to talk to each other. Sometimes they're API, sometimes it's the spreadsheet export import between tools. And in all these cases, while the cloud has made our life a lot easier on maintenance and patching and so forth, it's created a new challenge around identity risk management, which can include cross-application risk, security risks that are related to identities having privileges that conflict with other privileges and therefore create a bigger risk. So the question I want to leave you with this is, how many of you still rely on spreadsheets for some or part of your access governance? I'd love to hear your feedback this session or after we finish to see what we can do to help you. Anything you want to add to that, Rinder?
No, absolutely not. That's covered the wheelhouse more than adequately. This is what practitioners deal with daily, right? You've highlighted that. Flooding of workflows, requests without full context, manual work, cleanup needed, and audit teams asking for evidence on short notice. Not a good look, right? When you have to, when the auditors or the business has to scramble around and tell the board that some things were out of scope because, none of these tools talk governance to each other, right?
You got it.
So what are some of the business drivers then driving organizations towards this type of identity lifecycle management?
I can pick up on the initial part of this, Adil, if you like.
Sounds good, yeah. You deal with this every day, so good fun.
I think at the executive level, this is no longer just an IT problem. And on the flip side, governance isn't a compliance initiative on its own anymore either, right? And both of these things are unique in their own right business drivers. And while the titles might be subtly different and the language that those two sides of the business, i.e. governance and IT, are using might be subtly different, the central tenet to it, which is how do we know access risk isn't growing between audits, is the question that needs to be answered, right? And the commonality there, other than the technical nuances and the desire and the need to have tools that talk governance to each other, right, as we highlighted a moment ago, is that your business drivers are an opportunity for operational efficiency, and that means different things to different people, but in the light or the lens of compliance and governance, it should mean aggressive risk mitigation that's reliable, audit posture that's mature, that's ready to scale or descale, or ready to pivot if areas are not giving the expected information or the expected detail, right? So a level of agility is required. And often agility is married with manual effort, and that's what you don't want, and that's what you need to move away from. And the question then becomes, moves away from did we complete last year's certification to are we continuously assured, and are we able to go to the board with a set of documentation and a set of and a report, right? And board recommendations, both good, we're happy, this is maybe an area of concern, and this isn't good, and have evidence and operational resilience information that backs that up, right? And that doesn't necessarily need to mean more work. It just means that you need to take the approach that IT and audit have each other's back, and they can translate the information between each other, as opposed to what can happen if they're not on the same page.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight from a business driver's perspective. One of the things that I just want to add to that is, a lot of times when we're talking to our clients, the initial discussion that's been set by others in our industry is around operational efficiency. That's the first thing. So that's our default position as IT guys, right? That we always think IT is there to automate and make things more efficient. And that's the first place we look at. But I think if you look at it from a leadership lens, governance and agility and scalability are the items on the right that I'm hearing a lot more about from our senior managers in the client organizations. That's what they're under pressure to do, right? So, whether it's the trade, global trade, that's fairly dynamic and frankly stressful and experience with new laws and guidelines coming into the market, or other global factors. If you're in oil and gas, Texas, like I am, where a lot of our clients are in oil and gas business, or you're semiconductor and you're dealing with the supply chain of that complexity with global geopolitical threats that are being thrown around, or you're just focused on the U.S. market in the construction industry where interest rates impact your business. Agility is a key measure for driving success in the organization today. And as you said, it's not just about, as you said, Narinder, it's not about doing things offline to do it faster. It's about doing it systematically. And a governance solution that we envision for our clients is one that is flexible enough to adapt to those changes on a moment's notice, right? That's where we spend a lot of our time thinking from a product design, usability, integration perspective. And governance is completely different. It's no longer the quarterly board meeting or an annual review of stockholders at the stockholder meeting. It's really about that, federated approach where governance is happening across the enterprise in different systems and tools, but it's not providing that orchestration that management can hang their hat on. So policies are not enforced and workflows are not well defined, and that's where we can step in to help close the gap. And what we're seeing from the senior management in the buying organizations and customers is that agility, governance, accountability, and then finally scalability, right? Because the data is growing at a tremendous speed, so are the applications are sprawling. So having that ability to onboard new capabilities quickly and operationalize them to get results and outcomes is critical for our senior management clients at organizations. So those business drivers to me really stand out for me in the current world. But I think this is a great slide to highlight, the compliance in itself, right? There's new laws in AI that are coming out of EU. US is a little bit behind, but we all know that we're just waiting the first big disaster from AI before lawmakers will jump all in and start putting out all kinds of bills to pass through Congress that will restrict what we can do today.
You make a great point, and cyber insurers are increasingly going to be focusing in on that, right? And here, there's the mantra into business. Forget the business drivers. The cyber insurers are going to be focusing on this. Is my insured? Do they have continuous monitoring evidence? Do they have privileged access lifecycle controls? How is their SOD validation maturity? So that governance maturity will become a business driver because it will start impacting your insurance premiums outside of regulatory confidence, right? And acquisition valuation, which it does impact. We know that. But yeah, the entitlement rationalization will start to affect many other things. Agree.
So we started talking a little bit about governance. So I'm going to skip to this slide. So what does enabling governance in the identity lifecycle management cycle what does it look like? What does it mean? How can you enable governance in the process?
I have an idea. Well, let's walk through a scenario then, through sort of a governance-driven ILM maybe. The new employee is onboarded. Instead of manager approves, role assigned, okay, off we go to the races. We have policy validation embedded, SOD check executed automatically, role design validated, lifecycle monitoring initiated. I think that's a really important context there. And then continuous configuration validation becomes active. So governance doesn't happen after provisioning, it happens during provisioning, right? And so that means it's driven from the embedded life cycle event of the employee being onboarded. I think that's critical thinking of where this all fits together in the jigsaw puzzle. Adil?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. So this is the modern governance, right? That it's always on and it applies to everybody, to put it simply. It's not something that's done in a corner office before the board meeting, as I said previously. So you're absolutely right, Render, that it has to be embedded into your policies. In other words, have to be embedded into your process. We don't have the luxury to write down the policies and 3-ring binders, file them away in the executive suite, and then have the IT guys go build systems or deploy systems that hopefully, cross your fingers, that will follow the policies. That's just ain't cutting it anymore, right? So you've got to be able to have policies built into your systems, because the systems are moving too fast and they're only going to get faster with the AI and other capabilities that are coming to market. And so you need that not only continuous visibility, but also timely closed loop incident management as a result of that visibility, where you can find these hidden risks that are moving a lot faster at higher velocity. And as these controls report incidents of ineffective transactions or data or whatever, identity elements that you care about, that that those are recognized and assigned and then dealt with, treating the risk, in other words, which really means that governance in the modern world is about clear ownership, right? So, and that can be done with technology that exists today. We talked about workflows quite a bit in this session. And if you apply those properly and you have the fine-grained level of data available to you, most people want to do the right thing. And if they don't, there's systems and exception management handling that is very easy to deploy to send them reminders and escalations. But the main point is that this brings more accountability. Accountability is governance, as we said a little earlier, right? And then, I know we skipped a couple of things here for the interest of time, but we talked about IT auditors as well when we were preparing for the session. And for those of you that are responsible for that IT audit of all this, you also will be able to achieve results better for your organization by basically hooking up into these platforms like the one SafePass has introduced to get the audit reports straight out of the system, independent of the first and second line of defense. So you can maintain your independent evidence without you or your auditee having to scramble and get the timely results and hopefully positive results. In other words, effective controls, right?
Yep, couldn't agree more.
And this is the shift that we're witnessing, right? Organizations moving from, the traditional reactive approach to a more continuous approach.
Yes. I think, I think there's a couple of things here, right? Yes, it does absolutely reduce risk, right? Which is great. And rightly so, it restores trust in access security data, right? For time's sake, the example would almost be periodic reviews. Let's say, for example, uncover 200 exceptions. Remediation takes 90 days. During those 90 days, risk remains active. Continuous oversight detects exceptions immediately. That remediation cycle shrinks dramatically. And in one client, the expectation of resolution time drops from 45 days to under 10. And that is just, I think that is a pragmatic example for the practitioners on the call here, right? You know your numbers, and I think that's conservative in terms of how you stack in that shift. So, the technology shift is one thing. That real data point and the scalability of that data point and the advantages to an organization by using an application such as SafePass that's designed for purpose to do that are truly clear and can be communicated to the board very effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. I mean, that is the shift we always expect our clients to achieve when they sign up with us. And that's the mission we're on, is to get customers onto this new way of doing things by identifying these hidden risks that we have talked about throughout the presentation today, and then helping them go from a reactive to a continuous approach where risks can be controlled proactively. Embedded is the word we've been using, embedded into your processes. And that's where you will achieve operational benefits beyond restoring the trust in the access to your data and your applications. So just to kind of move forward, I'll just make one key message here, that it's not just about alerts. Continuous governance, or the good governance that we're talking about today, is not just one-way alerts. It's really about keeping the surprise out.
Right, not being surprised, not having to go to the board and being unprepared, which is very uncomfortable.
That's it.
All our practitioners know here, we've all been there at least once.
So what's it all about then? It's not just about permissions, right? We're talking about, governance here.
Yeah, I think this is a deal stage, but for me, it quips up as access security isn't about permissions, right? It's a performance function, Adil, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I believe in, that governance shouldn't, the outcome of governance should be just a compliance checkbox, which is unfortunate that we fall into that compliance category when it comes to funding and budgets. The budget that comes out of SafePass often comes from that compliance budget, but the outcomes we produce and what we really drive every day and strive to do for our clients is operational efficiencies beyond just identifying the risks and making sure they're compliant. We want to really help our clients ensure that there's accountability for governance throughout the enterprise. In other words, everybody plays a part. Every system, every human, every non-human plays a part in governing the enterprise, the modern enterprise that is always on and always there to serve the customers and responds to the market in an agile fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So to accomplish that, our intent strategically is to help our clients become more agile and become stronger as organizations and not get caught by surprises, right? So to me, this is a good way to kind of close this topic today around what you should expect from the solutions that we have out today and how we can merge into your roadmap or help you build a roadmap that'll achieve those strategic intents that are very specific to your organization. Yeah, so we're not just about checking the box. Do you have IAM capability? Do you have IGA capability? Do you have ITSM systems? We're really about, okay, how is access materializing into risks that is creating bottlenecks in your operations? And yeah, by the way, of course, we'll make sure your controls are more effective. You have more clarity, you're doing it more continuously, and ultimately you have more confidence and board has less questions, right? So that certainly will help you with that. But our goal is to really find the tough problems that you haven't been able to solve that are costing you money, and the cash is leaking from your bottom line.
That's right. And those leads very naturally into what you can expect, right? What really changes for practitioners, ultimately that bottom line thing. I think when we'll talk about customers in a moment, but ultimately it's audit prep time dropping, 6 weeks of manual compilation and the stress associated with that, which can't be understated, let's be fair, to 2 weeks of validation with a repeatable tool, high volume, high pace, naturally has a associated buzz to it as well, right? Roll time, design time reduced by 60%. Provisioning SLAs improved by 70%. So you're meeting your KPIs in those areas. The business, like, we want provisioning to be this quick. We want onboarding to be this quick. We want reporting and information, the information that we get to be this quick, or only on the second passes. Piece of paper for relating to provisioning or a form only passes across our desk once or twice. So reducing the overall stress associated with it. And collaboration, right? That trifecta of IT, security, and the business talking the same language, not just technical nuance, talking the same language, weaving the thread, right, that each person owns or each group owns to make governance sustainable operationally.
Absolutely, and I think that's how we have architected SafePath from ground up, based on these governance principles, and not just I know we're talking a lot about access today, but it's really about governing the digital platform. Everything has to be evidence-based. Controls have to be continuously monitored and embedded into your business. They need to be verified and timely, and they have to be continuously improved, because your business is continuously improving and changing. So to do that, you need a system of governance in your organization that provides the oversight at every step of the way in your digital life. So it's really a living, breathing governance system, not a tool that sits for reporting out results once a quarter to the board, because that's where the surprises are happening, and that's where companies are showing up in the headlines, in the newspapers, with third-party risks that have materialized in their supply chain, or insider fraud that has occurred that wasn't caught, right under the nose of the finance folks. So to avoid that, you need this type of a architecture that translates into, the things you've talked about today, specifically like faster provision that's aligned with policies, continuous assurance, reduce effort for auditors too, right? Better accuracy on your controls, including your access controls around segregation of duties, which is still a key pain point for many of our clients that have to report out results to the public markets and struggle with providing the assurances to their auditors in the accuracy, completeness of their SOD controls. And then on a broader scale, how do you improve collaboration across the enterprise? We're more hybrid. Some are still remote, and we're working in different geographies and time zones. So how can we operate as one team and improve our efficiency and credibility as an organization for our customers and our stakeholders?
Yep, and let's finish with a case study. So we only have 5 minutes left. I know you guys can talk about this stuff for days and weeks on end.
Probably. And I'm sure our audience has got other stuff to do as well, right?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up. We need to get our webinars down to the Instagram size, 30 seconds or less. I don't know how I can ever do that. But yeah, I'd love to start with that.
No, never.
Yeah, I won't make that Instagram age. But yeah, let me just kind of share a story, and feel free to add your comments, folks, Verinder and Emma. So we work primarily with the enterprise market. So this is an example of an insurance company that we actually acquired as a client right after, or I think during the COVID timeframe, when the whole world was kind of falling apart, and they reached out to us because they were facing some challenges with the restrictions on travel and FaceTime and everything else that was happening. So it's a client that's very dear and near to my heart, because we spent a lot of time with them with our masks on and so forth, even on the internet team calls and so forth, to understand their pain points. And they're a big client of Oracle. They use their ERP systems across the globe. It's a global organization. They also have invested in everything that's available in the market to protect their enterprise against risk. Insurance companies, as you might imagine or might know, are probably in the top of the list when it comes to risk-averse organizations that we deal with. So they're also they also have the highest standards on controls, the industry in general, in my experience, finance and insurance. So yeah, as you can see in the customer details, they had identity systems, they had Okta, for example, for managing that. Some things that are not mentioned here, they also had Workday or have Workday for HCM. So your typical enterprise footprint. And the challenges, we spend time with them, months with them, just understanding their challenges, which is very important to us because we do not want to just, we don't sell the shrink wrap software where you say SQL and install and it's done. We really craft our solution to meet exact pain points that the customer tells us, because it's broad and very flexible, adaptable, the way we built our solutions for the market, because our customers need that. So the challenges we specifically identified were between their IGA solution, in this case SailPoint, and Oracle ERP. And the top challenge was around provisioning itself. It wasn't complying with their policies. I think you've heard a lot of the pain points throughout this presentation, so I'll keep it short and sweet. And they had frequent changes in the organization, because dynamic, growing organization. They were deploying their ERP in multiple countries around the world, so it was kind of moving at a very fast pace with lots of moving parts. And they were running into these challenges onboarding users, just from productivity and operational efficiency standpoint, but also when they try to speed that up, they ended up with more control failures in their access management problem, which was highlighted by their own audit team, and also was mentioned by their external auditors. Their external auditors work closely with SafePass as far as knowing our products and tools. Obviously, they're independent, so they don't pick one tool or the other, but they were aware of what we had, so they referred the client to a number of players in this industry, and we were fortunate that our solution was the best fit for this client. And that's where some of our products like that we've not talked about today, but you can read about on our website, are products like Enterprise Access Monitor, Enterprise iAccess, Advanced Analytics, Safe Insight, and our connectivity ETL tools like DataPass and DataProbe is what they ended up picking to solve the problems that I've highlighted here. And so today, the organization is running on SafePass as one of their, what I like to say, federated identity governance solutions, because we federate and orchestrate activities across existing governance systems, because the other alternative would have been to rip apart what they had and put something new, which would have taken a lot longer, cost a ton more money. So having SafePass as a augmentation to their current IT systems was the wisest and most efficient way to move forward, and that's what we recommended. So today they have reduced the time they spend on roles and entitlement management between 50 to 70%, and they're freed up at least 110 hours. I think it's a little bit more than that, but that's the minimum number that conservatively we have recorded across their main business unit here in the US, and now they're deploying that capability across Europe and Asia. So this number will continue to grow in terms of savings. IT tickets that were stuck, as I mentioned, a lot of provisioning and correction to provisioning is still happening to the ticketing system because of the inflexibility of the centralized IGA systems that don't offer that integration. So they're able to do that through our ETL capabilities and save 60 to 80% of their tickets, because we can, for example, hook into, say, ServiceNow and create tickets and process tickets automatically, eliminating the human interference requirements there. And therefore, they've reduced the Oracle provisioning time by moving to SafePass by from 2 or 3 days, or maybe it was longer in some cases, but on average 2 or 3 days, into just literally hour or less. And definitely within 4 hours. Obviously, you need approvals, so we need to make sure that approvers are available. So on average, 2 to 3 hours from 2 to 3 days. And that's how they've achieved significant savings on their bottlenecks by bringing their operational efficiencies. But on a bigger level, on the strategic level, they have fewer audit findings, fewer questions from the board about their rollout, and the total cost of ownership is declining quickly. So I'll leave you with that as an example. I know we're a couple minutes over, Emma. We can wrap it up here, or if you have any questions, we can answer those.
Yep. Okay. Do you have anything to add, Verinda, before we wrap up?
No, let's close it out. Respect people's time. That's fine. Just go for
Okay. So yeah, we hope you've found today's session very insightful. I know that I did. If you'd like a further conversation and a hands-on workshop, please reach out to us, and we'd have to make that happen. And so we hope to see you all at our next session, which will be on March the 23rd with the Oracle User Group, OATUG, and that will be around efficiency, resilience, and safeguarding AI. So we hope to see you all then. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Verinda. Thanks, Adil. And thanks to everybody for attending the session.
Right.
Thanks.
Great. Have a
Bye.
good day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.